solid ground. The nations rise and fall. Kingdoms once strong, now shaken. We trust forever in your name.
Hello, welcome to another episode of the J Curve. Thank you for viewing. By the way, if you like what you see, hit the subscribe button if you're watching me on YouTube, or if you're on Facebook, hit the like button and tell me what you think. So today's episode of the J Curve, we're going to be talking about in sports or in Jesus or in Christ, excuse me. And then if you notice on the top of the book, I wrote location is everything. I remember when the time where I taught this in Sunday school. Now remember, for the people that are not watching this, we were teaching this book in Sunday school, I don't know, for the last 4 or 5 months. Okay, we got up to chapter 13. Now that we're kind of quarantined in the house, I figured that, okay, I'm going to start a video series of each chapter, and I'm going to start from the beginning so that the new viewers can get caught up with us. Okay, so all the people that have been in the class, just be patient, maybe just refresh your memory. But I want you to have a good time, listen, and relax, and let's see if we can apply some of these lessons to our lives, okay? All right, so today you can see I'm wearing my Grizzly jersey, or my Grizzly shirt. That's my daughter's high school, and then my daughter's volleyball club that's up here. I'm a big fan of volleyball because my daughter plays it, and she's awesome at it, okay? And so, you know, also I have to make a correction too. In my introduction video, Mr. Miller, the author of this book, if you're listening, I apologize because I said it was volleyball, that the story was about volleyball, but it's not. It's about field hockey. So, my bad. Anyways, so we'll begin. We're on page 59. All right, so in sports or in Christ, and it says, how location changes everything is the subtitle to it. See that? How location, yeah. Okay. All right. This is what it says, and I'm going to start with this little story that he tells at the beginning, which is kind of like the theme of this chapter. He says, I enjoyed watching my sisters and then my daughters play field hockey, not volleyball, field hockey, prior to some growth in sanctification. Now, I highlighted that because we just touched on sanctification on the last episode. If you missed it, just go back to the other video. That's where we kind of introduce it. Sanctification is growing in Christ. So first thing is justification by faith. That's when you accept and have faith that Jesus died for you, for your sins, okay, for you and me, okay? So once you do that, you're righteous before God, okay? And if I'm wrong, you can just put it down there on the bottom, okay? Let me know what you think. Sanctification is when you've accepted Christ and then you grow and grow and be more like Him, okay? So I know in this class, when we were talking about this, how much I have changed in the past 16 years. But I've had some ups and downs just like everybody else. I've messed up, I've screwed up, but I continue to grow. So I'm more like the Dow Jones, you know? So hopefully I keep climbing, but every now and then I'll fall and then I'll keep climbing up again. That's kind of like how the Christian life is, okay? It says, I used to combine cheering from the sidelines, and he's talking about field hockey. I used to combine cheering from the sidelines with free coaching tips, which led one coach to remind me she was the coach, not me. I want you to just check out this video for a minute.
For your G4 Charlie. Alert everybody.
What about the expectations of coaching a team like this in a community like this?
Well, I guess there's always a surprise or two in every community.
Ball. Just concentrate on hanging on the ball. Both hands. Hey, both hands. That's all. Hey. Come here. Come here. What's the problem?
Transfer field day. I can't you hold on to the football?
Pretty intense. We've seen this. We've seen videos of this where how parents react watching their kids play. Sometimes you want to go down on the field and talk to your kid. Sometimes I want to jump out there and tell Kylie, hold your platform. You know, keep your eye on the ball. You know, watch the ball hit your platform. All that stuff. That's us how we support our kids. And I'm not saying that all of it is right, because we screw up. And I see people, I see parents yelling at the referee. I see people yelling at the sideline judges, the other players, and so on and so on and so on. And after this lesson, it's changed me, because it gave me some kind of a self-awareness of, wow, you know, what's important here. Okay, so let me finish with this segment here real quick. When my youngest daughter Emily was in the 11th grade, she and her friend were benched. Uh-oh. The word on the team was that the coach was playing favorites. Neither Emily nor I enjoyed this. Her J curve was my J curve. I asked her if she wanted me to talk to the coach, but she said, "No, I'll do it, Dad." I was thankful for her maturity. Then I ran into another parent at the gym during all this, and she said, "I can't believe what the coach is doing with Emily and her friend." This is what Mr. Miller said. I'm actually thankful Emily has this low-level suffering on my watch. Life is much more like sitting on the bench than starring in a game. That sentence right there has a lot of impact. I can still, this Mr. Miller explained to us, after he said that, he saw the shock on her mom's face. It was like she had met a Martian. That is just, I could see it happening. I've been around parents, and you know, I know last year with my daughter's volleyball team, we were all kind of seeing some issues with the coach. It's kind of easy to get so into it that all your emotions lead your way. I could just say it that way, okay? I just remember, I love watching volleyball. And right here you can see a picture of my daughter and my daughter, you can see her, she's in a different jersey there, she's a libero. And just watching her play and how much, I just remember me playing football and what that has taught me over my lifetime. And responsibility, being a good teammate, how to support each other. There's so many life lessons that are in sports. And I just loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I share a lot of those stories with my daughter and try to help her sort through things that are happening in her volleyball career. And so let me show you this. This is a picture of one day, say it was last year or year before last, I ran into my old coach. It's Coach Suchma, myself, and Kylie right here. I ran into my coach. His name was Coach Suchma. He was my high school coach. I remember seeing him, and I ran up to him and I said, "Hey, I'm David Burke," and he goes, "I remember you. I know who you are." And he continued to tell me. He says, "You weren't much of an athlete, but you knew how to have a good time," or something like that. And I says, "Man, let me tell you, Coach Sussman, I really appreciate you and everything that you've taught me, and you know, I share a lot of those same stories or the same lessons that you've taught me with my daughter. And here, let me introduce you." And therefore, there's that picture. And he told Kylie the same story he just told me, that I wasn't much of an athlete, but I had a lot of fun. I was like, man, I played quarterback. I don't know. But anyways, being into sports is not a bad thing. It's not. It's like going to school where you can learn a lot of valuable lessons. But how you apply that and how much does it control you? Like the clip that we saw earlier where the guy comes out of, that's his father, comes out down onto the field. The coach is standing right there and berates his kid right in front of the whole team and everybody. What is that man into? Let's figure it out, okay? So in the second part, in sports or in Jesus, notice the role justification played in both our worlds. Now he's talking about how the other lady felt. Remember, she said, "I can't believe what the coach did to Emily," right? She's just being nice and supportive to him. But you remember the differences between the two, where he came back and says, "I'm thankful for the low-level suffering." He called it low-level suffering, and that life is more like sitting on the bench than starring in a game. Okay? So notice the role justification played in both of our worlds. The mom saw Emily slipping down the failure boasting chart. Emily slipping down the failure boasting chart. What? Sports righteousness. Remember, every time we talk about the failure boasting chart, we're talking about identity. Okay? Where do we place? Where do we put ourselves? Okay? So the way that other parent looked at it was that because she got benched, she's fallen down on the failure boasting chart. Okay? On the other hand, Jill and I, remember Jill is his wife, were concerned Emily was going up. And I put a big question mark on there. I was trying to, what is he talking about? Okay. She and her best friend were cute. We're talking something totally different than the field hockey. Okay, so now we're going to go into another subject here, but he ties it all up. She and her best friends were cute, athletic, and had boyfriends. Our daughter was developing a righteousness of her own that came from being in the in group. So apparently she was popular. When we were growing up, that was really important to me, is to be in the in group, you know, where all the popular kids are. Then he says, it was enough of a concern for Jill and me that when faced with a choice between buying a new car or an old car, we bought the old one. We didn't want Emily using a new car to elevate herself with her friends. And then it shows, do you see that right there? Here's the failure chart, the boasting chart. This is where the other mom was, and Emily falling down on the failure because she got benched. Then you look at just life in general for Emily and how you go through a small suffering, right? Okay. Remember, we go through this shape all the time. constantly, when you are justified by faith, you have now a J curve. You experience the life of Christ, the death of Christ, and the resurrection of Christ. Okay? So, he goes on and he says, while our children played hockey at the same Christian school, in that moment, this mom and I were living in separate worlds. Okay? I'd spent the last 15 years in a multi-layered fellowship of his sufferings. So Jesus had become a way of life for me. For that reason, when Emily encountered suffering, I was disappointed but not devastated. Even thankful for the opportunity for her to be drawn into Jesus. My thankfulness startled this mom. I seemed strange to her. We were both looking at the same scene. Two girls sitting on the bench. But our locations, what we were in, quote unquote, in, shaped what we saw. Let me repeat that. But our locations, what we were in, shaped what we saw. Now you remember, at the top of this page, I wrote, location is everything. So now we're starting to see how the J curve helps you, once you understand that you're going through one, it makes you aware and it changes the way you see things. The mom saw it one way without the J curve, okay? And then he saw it a different way. He saw it with the J curve and said, hey, I'm thankful for that. Where it just seemed really strange to the other mom because she didn't really quite understand why he was saying that. Okay. Then he said, the mom saw disaster, I saw opportunity for Emily to be drawn into a fellowship of his sufferings. And that's so, you don't want to see your kids suffer. You don't. I've seen it plenty of times. I've seen it where Kylie got benched. I've seen the libero spot get taken away from her. I've seen it all, okay? And the feeling that you get when that happens can be devastating. And at the time, I was guilty of it. Today, I look at it a little differently since I've been studying the J curve. And I think that's the purpose, one of the purposes of Mr. Miller writing this book, is so that you view things a little bit different. He says, notice how similar now he's talking about Apostle Paul. Notice how similar Paul's in Judaism is to the moms in sports. They're both without Christ, okay? Both forms of, and by the way, when he says in Judaism, he's not saying that I believe in Judaism, I practice it. No, he's in it. He's in it. Just the same as the mom is in the sports. It's not like she's just watching the sports. Yeah, I watch sports. No, she's into it. Okay? Both forms of life outside of Christ became centers of worship for them and distorted their views of the world. I have that highlighted. Matter of fact, I have a lot of it highlighted. Sports, of course, is not the problem. Remember, I said that. I love sports, and I don't think there's anything wrong with them. The problem is sports as an idol. Now, you've seen football games. Oh my gosh, you go to a Minnesota Vikings game, where these guys wear big old horns, and man, they're acting crazy. How about Los Angeles Raiders? Now is Las Vegas Raiders. All those, they call their stadium the Black Hole, where everybody's wearing black and put monster masks on. These people are into it. They're really into the Los Angeles Raiders or the Vegas Raiders and the Minnesota Vikings. They're really into it, okay? He says, in fact, he says the problem is sports as an idol. In fact, in ministry can be every bit as destructive as in sports. Ministry. Uh-oh. Remember, I was tempted to boast with my 2 coworkers because I made ministry into an idol. Remember, he went in there and he was in this meeting, he had this great idea, and man, he wanted credit for the idea, okay? The mom assumed we were both in sports. She was being kind, empathizing with me that my source of life, sports, was cut off. She was attempting to strengthen a community bond between the 2 of us, but I didn't live in her community, okay? My community was Jesus. So my mindset was shaped by the narrative of his dying and rising. Of course, this mom was a believer and thus in Christ by faith, but in this particular incident, when it came to her sanctification, okay, here's that word again. When it came to her sanctification, how she did life, she was in sports. So now we're getting a little more into sanctification. So when you start understanding the J curve, you are increasing you are going through another step of sanctification. You are getting closer, because what he recognized, first of all, when he saw Emily being benched, he didn't go into the sports world. He already had the dying of Christ in his mind. He is seeing the J curve all throughout this thing. Okay, that's sanctification. Okay, and then how you respond to it is sanctification. All right. So she was a believer. Okay, but maybe she just wasn't aware of what she was actually doing. Okay. So she goes, he wasn't in my community, it was Jesus. So my mindset was shaped by the narrative of his dying and rising. I've already said that. Of course, this mom was a believer and thus in Christ by faith. But in this incident, when it came to her sanctification, how she did life, she was in sports. Okay? I saw Emily slipping into community shaped by this story. Sports is everything. If your child is treated unfairly by the coach, go to war, demand justice, don't let people push you around. That false narrative was embedded in a larger narrative seducing her that success, and money were all needed. Okay? Then he goes on, he says, and I underlined this. He says that toxic narrative would not deliver life to her. I had a larger vision for her. A larger vision for her that the normal Christian life reenacts the dying and rising of Jesus. I'd been praying that she would not love the world for the things in the world. So I saw her bench warming as a God's gift. What we are in shapes how we react to life. Notice that idolatry in sports and union with Christ have the same structure. Both are sources of life, one false and the other true. And I put that in brackets. You can idolize sports, money, whatever. But there's only one thing that's true, and you tell me what that is. Likewise, what we were in shaped how this mom and I viewed the coach, because this mom was in sports. She saw the coach as the enemy. He had sinned against her sports idol and thus against the community. He says, I wasn't happy. This is what he was feeling. I wasn't happy with the coach. But because I was in Christ, I saw the coach as God's instrument to potentially draw Emily into Jesus. The mom was mildly upset. I was concerned, waiting and praying. My location in There's that word, location. My location in Jesus shaped my response to Emily's bench warming. It took the steam out of me. Union with Christ thrives under stress because stress drives us more deeply into Christ. On the other hand, union with sports wilts when your daughter is sitting out the game on the bench. Now, ain't that funny? So suffering is a gift, okay? Or what we've learned in our Sunday school class over and over and over again, that it's a mercy from God. What if you were sitting there and you're praying to, let's say your prayer is to be closer to Him. Do you realize that today, when we got this virus going on, that there's so many prayer sites that are coming up? They're on the news. I watch Fox News every now and then. I've seen more and more and more Christian commercials and advertisements on today during a crisis. So, do you think it's strange that there's a virus going on, but what is occurring is that people are wanting to get closer to God? Think about that for a minute. We are going through a J curve right now. It's a blessing. This virus is a blessing. The reason why it's a blessing and a gift from God is that we are getting closer to Him. You look at our world today, and you look at the TV, you look at all the stuff that's going on, the only thing that's happening that I see is that there are more and more people that are praying, and not only that, they're openly praying. And Christianity is becoming a foundation of hope. Think about that for a minute. Here I am talking to you. Normally I have a class in front of me. I don't have that because of this virus, but yet I'm still here. We are still here. Gerald is preaching. I'm trying to teach. I'm practicing my guitar. I'm ready to get back to normal life. Okay? But what is happening into this world right now is that there's more and more people that are growing faith, and sometimes the suffering brings it out. And that's what he's saying in this book, is that when she went into when she was benched, it wasn't easy for him, nor was it easy for her. But he viewed it differently, that it was a blessing for her, that she will be resurrected, that maybe this is not the purpose. This is a small death that we're experiencing here. There's bigger things for her, okay? All right, let me get back into the book. I can go on and on about it. So now, what we're going to be talking about is the justice and the J curve. And when I first read this, I didn't particularly like it, but now that I read it again and again, I'm more into it, okay? So the next one is justice and the J curve, okay? So what about justice for Emily? Was I neglected my duty as a parent? To clarify, if my daughter had been 9 years old, I would have talked to the coach. But as a 17-year-old, Emily was mature enough to talk to the coach herself. I even asked her a second time if she wanted me to talk with the coach, but she assured me she preferred doing it herself. Frequently, then parents pursue justice, especially in sports. It is just a mask for demanding their rights. I just thought this was pretty interesting, because the blessing is really that her daughter's maturing enough where she would want to talk to the coach herself. Kylie's the same way. You know, if I were to talk to Kylie about it, she'd prefer to talk to the coach rather than me. We could create more problems for her. That's what I've learned. You know, so when we kind of don't let our emotions take over and have us make bad decisions, allow your kid to grow and understand that she'll mature from this. Okay? And he says, the next segment is field hockey and resurrection. This has a lot of meat to it. I'm going through this whole chapter. I know I'm running long, but it's important. Greek Stoicism, which dominated the elite culture of Paul's day, taught that suffering is good for us. We've heard that before. It toughens you up. Paul knew that suffering matures you, but he wasn't he wasn't interested in any old suffering. You understand that? He wasn't just interested in any old suffering, only in the fellowship of Jesus' suffering. Now, think about that for a minute. He just doesn't want to just go through any suffering. He wants to experience Christ's suffering. So every time that Paul is bringing up or talking in the Bible, he is reflecting on what Jesus did for us when he was alive, when he was persecuted, and his resurrection. That's all that's on Paul's mind. Likewise, he says, I didn't want Emily on the bench because it was good for her. Hear what he just said. He says, likewise, I didn't want Emily on the bench because it was good for her. I wanted resurrection. There's a totally different way of thinking about it. It's not, hey, you're on the bench because it's good for you. It's not that. What Paul Miller was wanting was to see the resurrection. And then he says, I didn't know the shape or the timing of the resurrection. And that is important too. We don't know the time or the shape of it. That's on his time. Okay? But I knew God would hear my prayers for my daughter. God had helped me so many times that hope had become a habit. Isn't that beautiful? So in the midst of a confusing situation, I had clarity. I knew the story of Emily, and I were in Jesus' story. I knew where she was in that story, dying when she was on that bench. And I knew the outcome, some sort of resurrection. Clarity calms the soul. Clarity calms the soul. So when you recognize it, and you see what he's just said there, is that on that bench, he knows that she's in that bottom of that J curve. But he also knows there's a resurrection. But he doesn't know when or how or what it looks like, okay, at the time. He didn't want to see her on the bench, but he wants the resurrection. So he's looking for it. What happens next? The resurrection quietly emerged over the next few years. After Emily finished high school, Jill encouraged her to take a year off and work in an orphanage in Guatemala. We knew that loving a community of orphans, many struggling with their own self-absorption, might open a door in Emily's spirit to a fellowship of his sufferings. And every time you see that in this book, fellowship of his suffering, it's italicized. Okay, so it must be important. Sure enough, the work of love in a hidden place led to a new and deep work in Emily. She returned a different person. Do you think she used that time that she sat on the bench to go talk to these people in Guatemala? And use that experience to say that there's a bigger picture? I think so. And I know I'm running long, so I'm going to get through this pretty quick. The emotional life of the J-curve is the next segment. And there's so much information in here, I just cannot summarize it. So just bear with me here. As we've seen, doing life through the lens of the dying and rising of Jesus reshapes our emotions. He uses that term a lot, shapes. J, Emotions can grow in many ways. We can underfeel and suppress our emotions, or overfeel and give full vent to them, especially in situations like the one with Emily and her coach. It's easy to overfeel and become intense. Intensity then operates like a multiplier, escalating conflict. Knowing that Emily was potentially embedded in the story of Jesus' death and resurrection enabled me to relax. A key component of relaxing, especially in relational conflict, is not talking about the pain repeatedly with people involved. It's pretty interesting not to repeat and talk about it all the time. That's why I redirected the mom's comment into a larger story of how God uses suffering to shape and mature us. God's good theology made for good emotions. When we view life through a J-curve, it gives our emotions a peculiar cadence. I was bummed when Emily was on the bench, but I wasn't consumed by sadness. Knowing Emily was in the J-curve let me feel the weight of the path, but not be overwrought by it. It gave my feelings a frame. In our feelism culture, how I'm feeling operates like a new kind of legalism, constantly shifting with the winds of emotion. The path of Jesus, dying and rising, offers sanity and stability to our emotions. And I have that underlined. We can see the same emotional pattern in the Apostle Paul when he explains to the Corinthians the feel of the J-curve. This is 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 8 through 10. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed. Perplexed, but not driven to despair. Persecuted, but not forsaken. Struck down, but not destroyed. Always carrying in the body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be manifested in our bodies. The Apostle Paul was afflicted but not crushed. He was down but not out. Watching Emily from the bleachers, I was disappointed but not devastated. That is, I didn't underfeel. I'm so stoic trying to suppress or manage my emotions. I'm free to experience negative feelings. But neither did I overfeel. I could feel the effect of minor evil without it dislocating me. Why? Because, and I have this underlined, because the more familiar we are with the dying and rising of Jesus as a way of inhabiting life, the more capacity we have to absorb slights, discouragements, and weaknesses. We do life with a lighter touch. So what this book is doing at this point in time is helping you, well, he said earlier, this ain't a way of coping with things, but it changes the way you look at certain everything. Everything. And then it goes, the story of Emily on the bench gives us a feel for how potentially liberating the J-curve is in the rough and tumble of life. Initially, it balanced Jill's and my emotion, his wife and his, and reduced our anxiety. Externally, it calmed a quarrel and gave us clear direction for the future. It shaped both our goals for Emily and how we pursue those goals, not by pulling us out of the world of sports, but by helping us relax in that world. Last sentence. Location is everything. Where are you? Where are you? How are you going to look at things? My location is different now that when I'm reading, or let's just say this, my location is different now because I understand the situation that we're experiencing the J-curve. I can see it, I can picture it. And just like Emily, we don't know where the resurrection is going to happen. Here was her trip to Guatemala, and when she came back, she was a completely different person. Something must have happened there, a resurrection of some sort. And today, still, even Emily is still going through J curves. But because of her knowledge of the J curve, she can get through those things a lot easier. Thank you for coming today. I hope that you enjoyed this segment. Once again, I apologize for going. I try to keep them under 30 minutes, but when I get going on something, I just want to get it out. So anyways, God bless. Oh, next week, or not next week, maybe tomorrow. The next segment is going to be, it's all about who you know. I've heard that before. And in the subtitle it says Knowing Jesus in the J Curve. It's going to be another great lesson. I'm excited about it. Thanks for joining me. Stay home. Be good. See you next time on the J Curve.